Support for Carolina Business Review made possible by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries, headquartered in Hartsville since 1899. And by Business North Carolina Magazine. There's a place for those who subscribe to the theory that business doesn't have to be boring.
Well, by more than one measure, it has been a cruel summer. Certainly record number of days hitting record high temperatures. Politically, this heat has gotten out of hand, and economically, the ride has been a bit severe as well. Welcome again to the most widely watched source for Carolina business and public policy for 20 years now. I'm Chris William, and this time on CBR, a dialogue about what seems to be a schizophrenic economy, technology, of course, and the region's broader economic activity. And later on from RTI Chief Victoria Haynes.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. And by Novant Health, a not-for-profit group of hospitals and physician clinics, ranked as one of our nation's 10 best healthcare systems, caring for patients and communities in North and South Carolina. Major funding also by King & Spalding, an international law firm with over 800 lawyers in 13 offices worldwide, providing legal services to clients in the Carolinas and throughout the world. For more information, visit www.kslaw.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded August 19, 2011. On this week's program, Jim Roberts from the Center of Innovation for Nanobiotechnology, Frank Hefner, Department Chair and Professor of Economics, and special guest Victoria Haynes, President and CEO of RTI International. Now, Chris William.
Hello, welcome again to our program. Jim, good to have you back on the program. Thanks.
Thank
for
you.
joining us. Frank, always nice to have you from the Low Country in Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to start with this, Frank. The financial markets have been, schizophrenic and uneven and very volatile. And I've got to think economists that we've spoken to on and off the air have all said that fundamentally the economy hasn't changed. So what is driving not just the investor nervousness, but what is driving some of this real lack of confidence out there?
Well, there are a number of things. I mean, you could always go back to the idea that the financial markets never were rational in the first place, and why would you expect them to be anyway? And there's been a lot of research. There's a disconnect between the financial asset, especially the stock market. The stock market is not a predictor of much of anything in terms of real economic growth.
It used to be, 6 months to a year, you'd say the equity markets could predict what was going to come down the pike, right?
I don't know. It's kind of like the stock market has over-predicted the number of recessions we've had. So it's not a great indicator. It is a reflection of a lot of issues. I think it's a reflection more of sentiment, probably. Keynes referred to it as animal spirits. I mean, it's kind of totally unpredictable. But I think what we've got going now is fundamentally different than some of the other things we've seen in the past. We've had gyrations in the marketplace before, but never quite this volatile. And also never quite for reasons we can't make heads or tails out of. For example, the S&P downgrade of the Treasury bonds.
Right.
This was not an unpredictable event. There were signals all over the place that they were going to do it.
For a long time.
For a long time. There was concern. And so the rational market hypothesis would have said this has already been priced into it. So then they make the announcement. Monday morning, we wake up and everyone's panicked. And I thought, well, what happened? There was no new information out there. And so you have to wonder what's going on there. But I think the real issue is that this current problem we're in, and one economist is now calling it the Great Distress, because instead of a recession, is fundamentally different than everything we've seen in the last 20, 30 years. It wasn't caused by an oil price spike. It wasn't caused by IT overinvestment like we had before. It wasn't caused by the normal kinds of things. It was caused by a financial meltdown. And we haven't seen that in this country since 1929, 1930.
Okay, so do you think that the banking system is fixed? And I say that on the heels that Bank of America just announced that they're going to cut 3,500 jobs. A lot of people think it's going to be more like 10,000 jobs, and they're trying to carve out about $2 billion out of their cost structure,
Right.
and they're just one bank. Is banking fixed?
Can't say for sure, but I will say this, the market doesn't believe that it is. That's the issue, because now we're getting ramifications from Italy. And why, who cares? Why in the United States are we concerned that Italy's having a financial crisis, or Greece for that matter? And it's because of the interlocking nature of the international financial system. So I think the problem is, when we went into this mess, there wasn't a lot of transparency or understanding of what kind of assets financial institutions were holding. So the analogy I've used before is it's like a barrel of apples and you've got one or two rotten ones in there, and you just don't notice it until the stench gets real bad. Unfortunately, we may not have pulled out all those apples yet. And I think that's the fear, that nobody knows exactly what is hidden behind all of the accounting sheets.
Jim, you're over there nodding in agreement or disdain, or what is it?
Well, before my current job, I worked for the International Trade Division in Department of Commerce, and
In
there
North
was
Carolina?
in North Carolina, and there was the term pigs. Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain, and those were the countries that we were concerned about declining, and almost a domino effect of could those countries tip the rest of the global, or at least European economy into real problems?
And what was the conventional thought, that they could or they couldn't within commerce?
That it was, these were real problems. I mean, this is the opposite of the growth of the BRIC,
Right.
Brazil, Russia, India, China. These are the negative side of that, and this is kind of where more of the news is coming from, are the pigs versus the growth of especially India and China and Brazil.
And now we've added another I with Italy into the pigs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, I'm lecturing in Austria last year, and I talked to my German students. They said, why should they pay taxes to bail out Greece? And they hadn't thought about this. But it turns out, why is Germany bailing Greece out in the first place? And it's not that they're bailing Greece out as much as they're bailing out German banks that are heavily invested in Greek bonds. And it's when you get that kind of interlock that sends shivers through the entire market. So German banks have a problem. How does that affect U.S. banks? Well, the question is, where are the assets? Or where are the connections and the interlocking connections with the assets?
So there's still not any confidence that the banking system is fixed, which is a much more overhang that whether home prices go up or down is this whole idea.
The housing market right now is probably more of a popular way of looking at the problem and the malaise, but the real serious issue is the entire financial sector.
You know, I wish we could talk more about this. I do want to get to the technology piece. Jim, we talk about nano, we talk about biotech, and you take your pick anywhere in the Carolinas, and everyone has put a flag in the ground. South Carolina Research Authority has been on this program, and Bill Mahoney several times talking about how proud they are about technology and nanotech and biotech. RTP, the biotech campus in Concord, North Carolina. And so where are we with this? Is this a wish that we had more of a Silicon Valley approach here, or is North Carolina starting to get some real critical mass around this industry?
Oh, I'd say we're already past the critical mass. I mean, biotechnology is the second largest industry in North Carolina, behind agriculture, and they pay very high wage jobs above the average of the state. And we are the third largest state in the country for biotechnology. We are the fourth, in the Raleigh area, the fourth biggest city for nanotechnology. And so I'd say we're past critical mass, and we're catching up to the Massachusetts, where we could become the second biggest.
So every state and every region that has intellectual, if you will, intellectual critical mass, say they want to be in this space. Where is North Carolina when it comes to really having this as the next industry to save and to add those jobs? And by the way, Frank, the crew tells me that the unemployment rate is above 10 now. It's 10.1% nationally in North Carolina and in South Carolina. Can biotechnology fill that gap for those jobs, or are these much more higher paid, narrow wages?
Well, I don't know in the next 2 years, 5 years, that we can replace 10,000 banking jobs, but there certainly is a lot of growth. There are very promising companies in nanobiotechnology.
What kind of job growth annually? 1,000 jobs, 5,000 jobs?
Well, here's a perfect example. I got a call the other day from this conference that we're putting on. One of the people on the board of this conference said, hey, I've got a company, an international medical devices company that's looking to put down 50 jobs. I think it's going to be much more of that, where you get 10, 15, 20, 50 jobs at a time versus, the big 1,000 jobs. These are companies that are going to have to grow. Liquidia is a great example. This is a company that has $50 million, including $10 million from Bill Gates as an equity investment from the foundation. They have 50 employees now. If that company were to have an exit event in the near future, what are those 50 bright people that work there now? What do they want to do next?
Right.
Could they create 10 new companies that could be the next Liquidia? And that's 500 jobs right there. And that's why COIN exists.
Take a couple seconds, and then we have to move on. What is the conference you just referred to?
Sure. It's called the ManSef Comms Conference. It's a nanobio and MEMS conference. It's 16 years old. It travels around the world. We recruited this last year. It goes to Norway in 2012, Canada in 2013. So it truly is an international conference.
Where is it?
At the Grandover Resort in Greensboro, North Carolina. And we're expecting 400 to 500 people. We have representatives from 14 different countries already registered.
Okay.
So very big international conference.
Thank you, guys. We're going to have to move on, but thanks to both of you. And please stay around. One of the political dialogues going on now, and it doesn't get too much wide press, but you hear about it once in a while, is this thing called redistricting. Next week on our program, we're going to talk about redistricting. And even though it seems like a back office kind of behind the scenes dialogue, it is going to have very large implications for the Carolinas in the next decade or so. On the program, Louis Gossett, the president of the South Carolina Manufacturers Alliance, also Farrell Guillory, who's at the UNC School of Journalism, will join us from his office in Chapel Hill. Jonathan Kapler from North Carolina Free Enterprise Foundation will be here as well. If you don't take the time to look closely, understanding exactly what it is that RTI does, besides make money, is tough. At face value, they're a research organization for sure. They service governments, they service commercial clients globally. But what do they research, and how do they apply that statistical product? In 1999, our guest arrived as CEO at RTI. They posted total revenue of $206 million. At the end of last year, their top line was closer to $760 million. Joining us this time in person, I'm glad to say, is RTI President and Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Victoria Haynes. Victoria, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Particularly, thanks for taking time to get in the studio. We like to have you here, but it's always good to have you.
Thank you.
Victoria, people look at RTI, and I would say even in the triangle, they look at RTI and think, we love having them here. They've been here for 60 years, but what in the world do they do? You do research, but your mission is trying to better the human experience.
Right.
Tell us what that means.
Well, we're a contract research organization, essentially, but so we do research for hire. And as you had mentioned previously, it's both government and the private sector that supports our research. And our research, we are a not-for-profit 501c3, but we do make money. And that money has to be invested back into RTI. That's one of the requirements for a 501c3. That keeps us tax exempt. And I think that gives us an advantage in terms of we can take the income that we make and we can invest in new buildings, we can invest in new research programs that will position us competitively as the market changes, and also invest in our people, make it a better place to work, et cetera. But essentially we do contract research and services in the health sector primarily. About 2/3 of our business is health, and it covers everything from health surveys to working for pharmaceutical companies, doing phase 4 or clinical trials. We are actually in a clinical trial right now with one of our own compounds, which is kind of exciting. And to
being
policy.
a former chemist, I know that you're excited about that.
Exactly. We do health policy research. We do environmental health research. So health is and global health as well. We've talked about the malaria project and the neglected tropical disease projects in the past when I've been on here.
That's the international piece. And I want to get to this whole healthcare piece. Before we do that, when you first arrived in 1999, a very large portion of the revenue was derived from government contracts, and
That's
you've
correct.
been able to smooth that out with commercial contracts. But RTI still has a lot of government
Absolutely.
work. Some of it probably that you can't speak about, and we certainly understand that. But how do you lose this Or do you even try to lose this whole cloak and dagger thing that RTI has around some of the government work?
Well, there's nothing cloak and dagger about it. I mean, you can go on our website and see what we do. And we do publish quite a bit. We do a little bit of top secret work or secret work for various agencies, but that's a fairly small part of our portfolio. I think one of the reasons that people don't know as much about RTI as they could, we have we employ 2,500 people in this part of in North Carolina, as well as a little bit in Washington and a few other states. But we have $174 million of payroll to North Carolina that we bring. So you'd say, well, a company like that, everyone should know what we do. I think one of the problems is we do so much. We're a very diverse research organization, and a lot of what we do is dictated by the client, and the client usually likes to take credit for what we do as opposed to our going out there and blowing our horn.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that you probably don't get to advertise the results of a lot of the products.
That's right.
Exactly for that reason. So
That's right.
It's not quite a household
And even
name.
when we publish, we have to get, of course, approval from our clients
Right.
to publish, and we try to publish as much as we can. But yeah, a lot of it is, like the National Household Survey on Drug Abuse. We don't publish that data, but it's used across the country because it's a state-by-state survey to determine the effectiveness of programs, et
And
cetera.
RTI does that.
And we do that.
Right. See, I didn't know that, but I was familiar with the survey.
Education surveys, we do quite a bit on that side as well.
Go ahead.
The other question, I guess, and you alluded to this, is the ratio of public funding versus private. And
Yes.
I mean, given the climate of the market collapse, tax revenue collapses, political gridlock, where would you see yourself in terms of funding?
Let me tell you a little story, because when I started in 1999 and we were around 200 million, we only had, I think it was 10% of our portfolio was commercial. And so one of the things I wanted to do was build that commercial business so we wouldn't be as reliant on the government side. And we did build that commercial business substantially. We increased it by a factor of 6 or 7, but unfortunately, fortunately, our government business grew as well. So the absolute ratio of commercial to government business is about the same now, even though the commercial pot's a lot larger. But so that kind of is a dilemma that we've had. We were so successful with our government clients, and of course we did rise that wave of increase in government funding and did a good job. So,
And you're not worried about getting undercut on that government funding?
Well, we plan for those kinds of things.
Sure.
We do have a fairly robust backlog, and we do have cash, so we can weather some storms. We do see on the government side of our business that programs are being not canceled, but kind of delayed. So we're not seeing as many RFPs, requests for proposals, coming out. We're not seeing as many solicitations come out. It's been kind of a slow, the last 6 months have been very slow in terms of proposals for us. When we've talked with our clients about this, we get the impression that it's all going to hit at once, because even if it's a flat budget, if you look at the budget cuts, they're really in the out years. So if the budget remains the same for a period of time, which we anticipate it will, we would anticipate that we would have pretty steady funding. We may not have that growth that we have had in the past, but we anticipate it as pretty steady funding.
Jim?
I would think some way that your viewers, if they wanted to understand RTI better, if it was named Research Triangle National Lab, it would get a lot more attention within our own state. I'm very impressed with what RTI does, because I now live in the RTP, but with the declining federal budget, can you tell us about how you market your services to international markets, because you are RTI International?
Yeah, we have actually increased that. If you look at our strategy, as we've looked at what's going to happen with federal budgets, and they will even out or decline over time, and we don't know where or when that's going to happen or what area. But we do keep on top of it with our government relation folks, people like Brad that you know.
Right.
internationally, we have a presence in, I think it's 30 to 40 countries. The number changes with projects, and so we are marketing ourselves internationally, not only to the U.S. government to fund us on projects they might have internationally, but also to other governments. For example, we do have projects in Abu Dhabi that are funded by the Abu Dhabi government. We are working on a project in Saudi Arabia that we hope will come to fruition, and we've sent people to that part of the world talking with to market our capabilities, especially the applied research side of it, which is unique. You know, they have universities, they have industry. They don't really have an applied research facility that could help in terms of starting new businesses and what have you. So we do market there. We're setting up an office in China. We have one in India, and we're working on a relationship in Australia that would position us for the Asian market a little more substantially.
I'm sorry, Victoria, I want to interrupt you because we're going to run out of time, and I really want to get to this point because I know you have some opinions on this. You know, someone has written somewhere that I wrote down that RTI has analytical perspectives on public policy because of the depth of research.
That's right.
How do you use, how do you remain an honest broker of the information, of whatever it is? But yet, how do you use that perspective and the research as a power for good in getting the public policy discourse off of this maliciousness and back toward some type of intelligent dialogue about, what's best for everyone? So how do you influence
Well,
this?
we do have a government relations group that sets up fora in Washington, D.C. For example, we had one recently that included nanotechnology. It included this whole healthcare debate. We invite staffers, members from Congress to come. Whoever else wants to come, we hold them. I think we held 4 or 5 this year on various public and social issues. And we really can't use the data ourselves to present because, as Jim mentioned, there's the client owns most of the data. I mean, we just do the work, supply the data, and then they do whatever they want with the data, so to speak. But we can, I think, because of the deep knowledge that we do have on issues, I think healthcare reform is a great example. I mean, we do a tremendous amount of work in healthcare reform, that we can at least get the right people around the table and have a dialogue or a discussion.
So more of a facilitator with
So
some
I
of the
say
power
it's
that
more
you
of a facilitator. We also go to the Hill and often brief people, brief congressmen on what our data shows, if we can, where we are, what kind of work we're doing, so that they can understand that there is a lot of data out there. There has been a lot of analysis, and it's there. So we do try to be the honest broker in that regard. But politics is politics.
Yes. Oh, well said.
Unfortunately.
About 30 seconds left. A quick question.
Yeah, a quick question. And that is, that you've got a synergy, obviously, with all the universities around
Yes.
the area also, right? So you're working on that too. So there's furthering that kind of research and the educational infrastructure in the state.
That's right.
All for that benefit. One of the things, though, about the size of employment.
And this is a quick point.
Okay, we don't grow big anymore.
That's right.
We just don't grow
It's
big.
small businesses.
Unfortunately, with what's happened is we shut down big.
Yeah.
And that is now the problem.
That's true.
Good point. Well taken. Do you expect that there would be, we talk about this creative destruction within corporate business. How do we get creative destruction within the government to really get? And I guess that's the question. Isn't it?
30 more minutes?
Wow, yeah, I'm not quite creative destruction within the government. Well, there's obviously lots of waste in the government, and I just think it takes leadership, someone to step up and say, and it takes leadership at the highest levels.
Luckily, we are out of time, and you don't have to answer that question.
It always takes leadership, though. Remember that.
That is a good way to end. Thank you. Victoria, nice to see you again, and thank you for
Thank you
being
very
here.
much.
Thank you. Jim, thanks for being back on the program.
Yes,
Good to see
sir.
you. Frank,
Thank you.
always
Thank you.
nice
Thank
to have
you.
you from
Good to be
Charleston.
here.
Thank
Good to be
you.
here. Up and
Thank you
down.
for watching. I'm Chris William. Until next week, we certainly hope all your business is good, and Bet your weekend is too. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. And by Novant Health, a not-for-profit group of hospitals and physician clinics, ranked as one of our nation's 10 best healthcare systems, caring for patients and communities in North and South Carolina. Major funding also by King & Spalding, an international law firm with over 800 lawyers in 13 offices worldwide, providing legal services to clients in the Carolinas and throughout the world. For more information, visit www.kslaw.com. Additional funding provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. There's a place for those who subscribe to the theory that business doesn't have to be boring. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries, headquartered in Hartsville since 1899. And by viewers like you. Thank you. You may write us at Carolina Business Review, 3242 Commonwealth Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28205.